Alrighty, we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Bell. It's not Critical Start Events, as it says here on the screen. I'm the Customer Marketing Manager at Critical Start. Thank you guys all so much for joining our customer webinar, Vulnerability Management's Critical Role in Guarding Against Cyber Threats. Before we get started, I quickly want to review a few housekeeping items for the session today. This is being recorded. You'll receive this recording within 24 hours post-event. We're also going to be doing some polls throughout the session today. Those are going to be launching as we go, and please make sure once we launch those, you only click one answer and just one time, because you can submit over and over and over again on these ones. Also, we encourage our attendees to get chatty. Please engage with our speakers and with each other. Feel free to use the chat function in the right-hand function panel. The more interactive this presentation, the better. You are all automatically muted. If you'd like to ask your question live, you can raise your hand and then we can bring you on stage to chat with Chris and Aditi. Otherwise, place your question either in the chat or the Q&A box in the function panel. Now that's all from me. We can go ahead and get to the good stuff. I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Chris Carlson, Chief Product Officer at Critical Start. Chris, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, and exciting to be here and talk to you all as customers at Critical Start about an offering we have around vulnerability management service. So I'm joined by Aditi, one of my product managers that has worked on this offering, and we're excited to go through this session today on a couple of different topics. So we'll talk about the general state of the vulnerability landscape and how companies are either struggling or achieving their vulnerability management programs. We'll talk about what our offering is here at Critical Start. It's a new offering around a managed service for vulnerability management. I'll give a quick demo on what we've done and integrated into the Critical Start platform. And then Aditi will spend more time talking about the individual service delivery aspects of our offering. So with that, let's get started. So we'll talk about vulnerability exploit trends overview, the vulnerability management program life cycle. I think that the middle one, the operational impact of successful vulnerability management deployments, is where we'll spend most of our time. And for Critical Start, doing managed detection and response, or MDR, for many years, we don't just handle the SOC aspect of the alerts that have come in. We help customers mature their security programs through their endpoint detection technologies and also their SIM and identity and cloud and those type of things. And the best tool that you buy may not be operated or deployed the best to give you the best outcomes. So that's why we're excited to have a Critical Start vulnerability management managed services offering in addition to our managed detection and response. And then we'll go into more details around what we do for the service offering and really that prioritized patching to reduce risk. And of course, we'll take a Q&A and those type of things. And we have 4 exciting polls. So we'll be asking you questions. So you all, as customers at Critical Start, we enjoy hearing feedback from you, whether it's during our cyber risk reviews, talking to your customer success manager or your salesperson, or even coming by a booth at RSA or Black Hat or one of our many events. I'd love to hear from you and what you're working on and what you're thinking about doing next year. So first poll. So the poll may have popped up. Do you currently have a vulnerability management tool deployed? I don't know if it's yes, no, maybe, but we'll give you a few seconds to answer the poll. Do you have a vulnerability management tool deployed? Normally what we mean is something that you have it always on and always working. But if you have vulnerability management as part of a quarterly assessment, that may count also. So first poll, we're going to ease you into it here on your vulnerability status. I don't see the poll results, but I think it's clicking in. And then you can also answer as I progress with the slides. So vulnerabilities are increasing every year, and this is data from one of our partners, and this is also something around publicly disclosed what's called a CVE. So this is not the count of a vulnerability that a customer or organization may have. This is unique vulnerability disclosures coming out every year. Prior to me joining Critical Start, one of the companies I worked at was Qualys, which is a vulnerability management vendor. I would say one of the leading ones. And I worked there from 2016 to 2020. And when I started in 2016, that's right before this increase that it really took off. 2017, for those of you that have been around the block for a while, is when WannaCry hit the world, and that as a laterally spreading ransomware worm that targeted vulnerabilities without an authentication to exploit it was a game changer. And not only did that really change how companies think about vulnerabilities being weaponized by organized crime or for malicious purposes, it also changed how a lot of companies thought about vulnerability management and how they can mature the program and use it to reduce risk and inform how they operate their remediation programs. So even though that vulnerabilities are increasing and many customers and organizations are playing whack-a-mole, there's a vulnerability disclosure and you want to do a patch, and then there's a Microsoft new update and you want to do a patch. If we think about how adversaries or threat actors or organized crime are targeting vulnerabilities, ransomware is one of the first and major and important things that organizations of all sizes are dealing with. But ransomware, in many cases, beside being targeted, it is also an crime of opportunity, because a lot of the ransomware exploits and the ransomware exploit kits are targeting vulnerabilities that are 3 to 6 years old. So this is data from anonymized sources that you can look at that, the percentage of vulnerabilities being targeted. One of the vulnerabilities, the CVE, is from 2018. That's 6 years old. Some of them are 2021. So this is less about the actor, the threat actor, targeting vulnerabilities. It almost speaks more to the organization on, do they have a mature vulnerability management program? Do they know where all their vulnerabilities are? Are they able to prioritize by threat actors and what they're targeting? Are they actually patching these vulnerabilities that create the greatest risk inside their environment? And we'll talk about how we can help prioritize by threat actor attacks, ransomware, botnet, exploit kit as part of our Critical Start service. The last thing before we move into our offering details itself is that one of the scoring mechanisms is something called CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And they have a 10-point score with 1 decimal point. But these are all of the CVSS weighted average V3 scores. There's a lot of critical, there's a lot of high, and the weighted average is 8.7. Unfortunately, if everything is critical or everything urgent, then nothing is urgent at that aspect. I travel a lot for work. I go down to the Critical Start company headquarters in Plano, Texas very often. I fly a lot, TSA pre. Sometimes the TSA pre lines are longer than their normal security lines. Everyone gets it now. You all get it with your credit card and these type of things. And that lines up to CVSS or vulnerability prioritization as well. If everything is critical, then it's hard for organizations to really identify what's impacting their environment more than anything else. And I did a webinar on this topic, vulnerability topic, earlier in April. And the timing was, I was just looking at the internet, and ChatGPT and GPT-4 just came out. And this article came out the same week, actually the day before I did that other webinar, but I'm including it here because I think this is still topical. GPT-4 can exploit most vulnerabilities just by reading the threat advisory. So the threat advisory that you would get for the National Vulnerability Database, they want to give a lot of information to organizations to understand why the vulnerability is there, give some mitigating controls, patch, registry key. It's an unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability. They want to give a lot of information to defenders on what these vulnerabilities are, and GPT-4 can just read it and go in and now write an exploit against it. We haven't yet seen a lot of GPT-based or Gen AI-based exploits. Unfortunately, I think it is a matter of time for that. And what they're going to do is they're going to monetize that by focusing on botnets, ransomware, exploit kits, and those type of things. So when we talk to customers of all sizes, and a lot of them either have a vulnerability management program, that's what the first poll was, or considering on making it better. A lot of them have operational challenges in their vulnerability management program. And these 7 questions here, or these 7 statements of where their challenges are, fall into 2 major categories. The ones on the right-hand side with the yellow triangle are those issues that impact complete and accurate results of your vulnerability management program. Inaccurate asset inventory. Okay, I think I have 1,000 hosts. I think I have 3,000 hosts. I'm just going to scan them. Well, if you don't have 3,000 hosts, you really have 3,500, and you're not scanning those 500. Now you don't know about those vulnerabilities on those 500 hosts, and you won't know that you need to protect them by remediating or patching vulnerabilities. So that happens a lot. But what's interesting is even if you solve that problem and you have complete and accurate results, then you have to support the timely vulnerability remediation, which is where, in our case of a security company, our IT counterparts are the ones that do the remediation. For all of you as MDR, Managed Detection and Response customers at Critical Start, you get alerts from us and you push the button to resolve that alert. Not so in the case of vulnerability management, where you have to rely on the ownership of the application, the owner of the operating system, the IT teams to remediate. So while you can have the best vulnerability management program for complete and accurate results, if there are operational processes or problems that prevent timely vulnerability remediation, that's going to affect negatively overall the entire vulnerability management program. And that's areas that we can help with as well, around identification of false positives, separate ownership of vulnerabilities, and then ultimately prioritize all those vulnerabilities to things that really matter for that. So now we come up to the second poll. What do you find most in your vulnerability management program about managing vulnerabilities? I don't see the poll myself. I'll probably click on everything. It might be a multiple choice, but what do you find most challenging about managing vulnerabilities in your environment? No wrong answers. We'd love to hear from you. So we'll give it just a few seconds to come in. Okay, and I'm looking forward to see those results and where it lines up with those common areas that our customers we've been working with have. So now I'm going to move into the vulnerability management service by Critical Start. So the vulnerability management service is two things. One is you as a customer must have a vulnerability scanning or vulnerability management tool. And what happens a lot is customers buy the tool, but then they don't have the experience, the skill set, the people, the operational expertise, the 24/7 ops, threat intel to actually operationalize it to get benefits. That's very similar to our MDR customers, our Managed Detection and Response. They buy the endpoint security technology, they buy the SIM, but they can operationalize it as well to a further degree. This model is very similar to what we do with our vulnerability management service as what we do with Managed Detection and Response. The customer, you, would have the tool. In this case, we partner with Qualys, and there's a reason why, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And then our managed services does all of the operational process, the 24/7 ops, the continuous scanning, all the setup, all the change management. We added a subnet, we removed a subnet. You're in public cloud. You were told by the business group that there's 40 servers running in public cloud. There's really 90 servers running in public cloud. So we do the ongoing change management, where we do the ongoing break fix. Maybe the network security team put in a firewall rule and broke the scanner. We do all that monitoring and those type of things around customization and reporting. So when then you get that well-managed vulnerability management program, the other capability around vulnerability-specific threat intelligence drives that risk-based vulnerability management to help prioritize. We identify vulnerabilities that are weaponized and used by threat actors, ransomware, botnet, exploits, those type of things. We separate vulnerabilities by OS level, application level, and we can work with you to identify application or device or IT owners, and then we can give different remediation guidance to different teams to help resolve those vulnerabilities. And that's the managed service, and DT will go into more detail on the actual service delivery elements that we do from each aspect. So we did partner with Qualys. So we do use Qualys as part of that. I did work there as VP of product for 4 years. I know their technology very, very well. They're a strong partner. They have some of the best capabilities spanning different areas around vulnerability management. They also have some integrated patch management capabilities that might be interesting for those customers that want to use the same agent to find vulnerabilities and patch. But it's been a #1 vendor some of the largest customer deployments down to the smallest. We partner with them very well. And because we are not just using them as a technology, we're solutions and a services partner for them. So we get access to APIs and we get access to capabilities that a customer themselves may not get access to. And that really helps us create a strong managed services for that. We announced publicly at Black Hat a couple of weeks ago that the asset visibility capability that we developed at Critical Start, the asset visibility and host-based inventory, is now included for free with your MDR service at no charge. This is also included for your vulnerability management service. So ask your CSM to turn it on. We are rolling it out over the next couple months. And if you want to need it or get access to it, we can turn it on and then configure it for you. On the left-hand side, that's where that host asset inventory becomes very important, a normalized view of all your assets. So we connect to Qualys if you're a vulnerability management customer for us, and we get all the assets that Qualys is monitoring. We connect to your endpoint technology, whether it's Microsoft Defender for endpoint, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, all of those guys, and we can bring it in and get a view of that. And then we can connect to other asset sources like Active Directory or Intune or Jamf for Mac or these type of things. And then we build a unique view of host inside your environment that allows us to ask questions like which systems are missing an endpoint security agent, or coming very soon, which systems are missing a vulnerability scan. So now you know your vulnerability scan coverages. In the second one, we allow them to bring on your asset in criticality as part of the inventory. Because once again, if all vulnerabilities are critical, no one gets prioritized. But if all assets are the same, no one gets prioritized as well. So integrated into our Critical Start platform is our asset criticality, where we can work with you and assign criticality by certain tiers. Tier 0 is the administrative root of trust. Those are those systems like Active Directory, domain controllers, your patch management system, PKI systems, single sign-on, multi-factor systems, that if a threat actor breaks into your administrative roots of trust, they can own your entire environment. Tier 1 are mission critical systems. Tier 2 are business critical systems. Tier 3 are business supporting systems. And Tier 4 usually are end users that support the business, and we have an unknown or unranking as well. Now that you get a full view of your inventory, a full view of the asset criticality, that benefits your MDR capabilities, but just imagine what it can do and what questions it can answer for prioritization for your vulnerability management program, i.e. vulnerable assets by asset criticality distribution. So when you see some of the demos, you'll see how many thousands or tens of thousands of vulnerabilities people may have, but to prioritize it by critical assets, prioritize it by what's being weaponized or attacked, now you get a smaller list to take care of in your environment to reduce risk and have a more resilient a cybersecurity program in your company. Some of our customers that we first deployed earlier this year, some of them have 200,000 vulnerabilities, 250,000 vulnerabilities. Some of them, the smaller ones, have 45, 50, 60,000 vulnerabilities. It's very hard to get down to vulnerability 0. Let's patch the 1, the 5, the 10, where you can reduce risk as much as possible. And that's why we created a separate and a new risk-based prioritization capability. So we do bring in the CVSS V3 and V4 scores. We do bring in the risk scores from our vulnerability management partner, in this case Qualys, but then we layer on additional capabilities that are unique to us for now. So our vulnerability threat intel, we bring in Critical Start, Cyber Research Unit, research vulnerabilities, and a commercial threat feed as part of vulnerabilities, whether it's weaponized by a botnet or ransomware, where it's actively exploited. Because a vulnerability that's theoretically being exploited, okay, it's a potential risk, but no one's really exploiting it. So maybe focus on things that are currently being exploited by organized crime or nation states. Then we move into that asset criticality, which is a criticality of your assets to prioritize those. And then with an MDR service, we will also give you that endpoint coverage gaps. What systems in your environment are missing an endpoint security agent? Well, why is that important for vulnerability management? In many cases, an endpoint security agent may not stop a vulnerability from being exploited. That vulnerability will still be exploited, but an endpoint security agent most likely will stop the second stage effects of that vulnerability exploit. The endpoint agent may stop ransomware being dropped, or malware being dropped, or PowerShell being run, or a user account being added. The vulnerability gets exploited, but the second stage gets stopped by the endpoint security agent. Well, guess what happens if you have systems in your environment that don't have an endpoint security agent with critical vulnerabilities? Likelihood of it being hit and nothing to stop it. And then we take that even further. And then unique for us at Critical Start is that we have and we are building custom vulnerability exploit detections for our MDR customers. So rolling out soon is if you're an MDR customer and you have our vulnerability management service, we have custom detections that will detect if a vulnerability was exploited. That's in your environment. That's even more important than anything else, right? Theoretical, okay. Actively being exploited, okay. Exploited in your environment, that's something then that you even want to prioritize and focus on even more. Before I go to the next slide, there's a question in chat. Is this a separate product or now part of some existing products? The asset inventory is a separate capability, but included for free with MDR. The vulnerability management service that we're talking about is a separate capability, and that is a separate license fee to use our vulnerability management service for your vulnerability program at your company. So a couple slides, and then I'll move to a demo. So while you have the license to Qualys as our vulnerability management partner, we do not hide access to that. You own the license. You can log in. You can see everything we're doing in terms of managing scan profiles and managing vulnerability scan agents and custom dashboards and standard reports. We don't hide that. You get full access to it. Some managed service providers hide access to the vuln management tool. We don't. We give you and let you have full access. But what we do in the Critical Start platform is we connect to the Qualys platform in your tenant via API, and we pull down all the vulnerability data. And when we pull down the vulnerability data in our platform, now we can do that prioritization that you can't do in one tool by itself. Now that it's in the Critical Start platform, we can correlate prioritization, threat intel weaponization, endpoint coverage gaps, asset criticality in the Critical Start platform to give you unique perspective on where to handle vulnerabilities to prioritize. So here's a screenshot of your number of open vulnerabilities, the number of reopened vulnerabilities, number of fixed vulnerabilities over time. And really where it comes down to is that prioritization. It's us taking a multi-vector view of all the additional data points and telemetry for being a Critical Start customer. And now we can focus vulnerability remediation on those efforts that have the most impactful. So for example, ransomware. In this screenshot down below, there's 5,721 hosts in this environment. 686 of them have vulnerabilities that ransomware actors are targeting. 12% of your systems have vulnerabilities that ransomware actors are targeting. That's a big attack surface. That's a big exposure. And we bring you that very easily. You can click on list assets. You can see where it is. You can sort by asset criticality, create a report, give it to the IT teams, and patch this now. And that's really powerful to identify the biggest changes that you can do for the biggest risk reduction in your environment. So I'll give you a walkthrough at the demo and show you what this looks like. So I have a demo environment here. So the data is demo data, of course. It's not customer data. It does represent reasonable real-world numbers that we see in our customer environments. So as a Critical Start customer, you log into our Critical Start platform. Hold on, I went into full screen mode to the browser, and now it just disappeared on me. That you have full access. So when you log in, you see our cyber risk dashboard. You log in, there's the manage detection and response menu that you see all the time. You work at the dashboards, you work with alerts, you can get reports and those type of things. This is where that new asset visibility capability is, where you can connect to all of your systems, find unique hosts, and answer questions like, how many hosts in my environment have an endpoint coverage gap? In this demo environment, 11.9%. So that's included for free now. to do that. But let's talk about the new vulnerabilities tab. So I'll just click on vulnerabilities. So once again, when you have our vulnerability management service, we'll turn it on, suck down all the data from Qualys, and now we show it here. Let me collapse the menu so you can see more of the screen. So this doesn't replace the Qualys interface. It's an augmentation of it to help you orient yourself on where you really want to focus. So you can still use the Qualys interface. We create custom dashboards and custom reports and all those type of things. But this view within the Critical Start platform, now you can see at a glance my number of vulnerabilities and the trend over the last 45 days. So this is demo data, so it looks like a heartbeat, but 57,000 vulnerabilities over the last 7 days. I'm going to skip over to reopen and look at fixed vulnerabilities. Now you can see the trend of fixed vulnerabilities that have happened. Well, there's a lot coming in and not a lot going out, and you can actually see that and validate it. Looking at the fixed vulnerabilities is a way for the vulnerability team to have a view on what the IT teams are remediating. We gave them 1,000 vulnerabilities. They've only done 300. We expect that we want to have a burn down rate equal to the new vulnerability rate, and the burn down rate is not the same. This will give you the situational awareness for that. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about this reopened vulnerabilities. This reopened vulnerabilities is something that's not often looked at, but it's very, very powerful. So if you think about a normal vulnerability management program, there's new vulnerabilities detected, and then the IT teams patch it. And then you verify that the patch closed the vulnerability. And then the next day or the next week, new vulnerabilities detected, and then the IT team patches the vulnerability and you verify it. And then Patch Tuesday comes out from Microsoft. I don't think they call it that nowadays. The new monthly Microsoft security update comes out, and everyone scrambles, and there's the vulnerabilities go up like this, and then you patch it and you look at it. But what happens over those months and over those quarters is the environment changes behind you. A patch that you deployed last week may have gotten broken today. End-of-life software or a vulnerable piece of software that you uninstalled to get rid of the vulnerability, the patch management system or a software deployment tool may have reinstalled that software. So if you're only looking at new vulnerabilities or total, or only looking at fixed, you may miss that things are breaking behind you, which increases your exposure. So that reopened vulnerabilities is really, really powerful in terms of seeing if something's sort of breaking behind you as part of that. When I was at Qualys a couple of years ago, I saw that firsthand in customer environments. Software deployment tools were deploying version, let's say 10 of an application. And it was configured to make sure that version 10 is always being deployed. So for example, when then they patch version 10 to version 11 to fix the vulnerability, guess what the software tool does? Reinstall version 10. So now you have the vulnerability team and the software deployment team who don't know about each other, conflicting and competing on the version of the application to fix the vulnerability. So that's really intriguing. So now you can orient yourself across all these systems and those type of that. But now I want to click over to the list view and get some more details around this environment. So this environment has 5,761 unique assets. And if I look at my prioritization, where are all of these red highlighted widgets, 651 assets representing 11% of my environment have vulnerabilities that are impacted by a ransomware threat. 651. Now that seems like a lot, 11% of the environment. Any one gets hit by ransomware and it spreads laterally, that's a bad day when it comes to the IT team. Botnet threat, 601. General exploitation, a lot of the assets, but where we work with our customers on, and where our managed services team always evaluates this and drives that recommendation and monitors and makes sure that you get the burn down. If I click into the ransomware threat to list all the assets, that's that 651. Now I can look at and get a different view. Well, of the 651, 8 are tier 0 assets. Those are really important assets if they get hit by ransomware. Tier 1 and tier 2 are also very important. Now we have a lot of unknown or unranked. Maybe we should look at that as well. So that's why this capability is very powerful, not only for the normal operating motion of We find a vulnerability, we patch it. Microsoft update comes out, we patch it. But this allows you to do ad hoc investigation of what is the biggest threats in my environment, what is the smallest number of patches that I can do to fix the most number of vulnerabilities, and where's my threat from ransomware across my critical assets. We give you all the visibility here. It's very simple to use. It's 2 mouse clicks. You can get that information, and I can come over here and click the export report button and give it to my IT teams to prioritize this remediation as part of that. Our managed services team will present this information to you, but we don't hide it, and we want to show you in a self-service capability. So I see that there's some chat that are being answered too. And then we'll move forward for our third poll. So poll number 3, what factors do you think contributes most for a successful vulnerability management program? So the first poll is, do you have vulnerability management? Number 2, what are some challenges to operationalize it well? Now, what are some factors you think contributes most to a successful vulnerability management tool in your environment? Either what are you doing now, or where do you think that you can actually do that? I don't hear the mouse clicks, but I just imagine you busy as bees responding. So thank you for the information. All right, just give it a few more seconds. This might be multi-select. There might be a lot of questions. There might be a lot of factors. Maybe the one factor that contributes most is to contact Critical Start and have us run your vulnerability management program as a managed service. I'm not too sure if that was one of the questions. We'll make sure to add it next time to make it easy to answer. Okay, so now we'll get down into the service delivery deep dive. And this is something that when we talk to customers or even prospects, we spend a lot of time on this. Well, why? So a lot of customers, when they go with us for the MDR service, they go through the process and they become familiar with how our platform and our SOC handles their detection alerts. Well, sometimes there's some trust on the vulnerability management side. Well, how do I know that you're going to do a good job? I have a slide that says we did, but what are those service delivery things for us to show that? So I'll hand it off to Aditi to go to each of these items.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for anticipating. Thanks for emphasizing the need of having a successful vulnerability management program. Also, thanks for highlighting the need to prioritize the vulnerabilities, given that the vulnerability typically comes in hundreds and thousands in number, right? So let me take it from here. Mm, uh, so we are going to do a deep dive of what all features we offer as a part of the managed services via Critical Start. One question that we get very often is, what exactly is the feature of Qualys as like the vendor is providing, and what exactly is your value add, right? So to make it easier for you, what we have done is, wherever you see the Qualys logo, that's a feature that is coming in, or that's a value coming in via the vendor Qualys. And wherever you are seeing the Critical Start logo, that is the value add by our managed services team. Okay, so for any vulnerability management program, right, it starts with the scoping, right? Scoping of the assets. That is all the assets that need to be considered, that need to be scanned for vulnerability. So we typically start with interviewing with your IT team, security teams, check if they already have the inventories of the assets from internal perspective as well as from external perspective. And then we start with that. However, sometimes what might happen as well is that the inventories are either not there or the inventories are not updated at all. So in this case, Qualys comes to a rescue with a feature called as Asset Discovery Scan, meaning that within a range of IP or within a given domain as such, it can run a discovery scan to exactly know that where and which IPs are the assets in your network. And when I say asset, we literally mean every sort of asset over here. So Qualys covers virtual assets, endpoints, routers, load balancers, web servers, app servers, databases, firewalls, switches, and so on and so forth. Typically, given the range of IPs, different discovery methods are used, like if the TCP/UDP ports are open, then the commands like press route, ICMP, DNS, they are checked. And by using all of those, multitude of those methods, the assets are actually found out. So now with this manual as well as automated methods of gathering data about the assets, we together decide the scope, that is the assets that need to be scanned for vulnerabilities. We typically suggest you to do this asset discovery scans once at the start of the service and thereafter once or twice in a year. This entire exercise also helps you to discover not just the legitimate assets, but also the legitimate but unknown assets to you, as well as some rogue devices if they are present in your environment. So we update these all these records in the VMS, and from there we take it further to deployment of different scanning sensors as such. Next slide, please. Okay. So Qualys offers variety of scanning sensors. Scanning sensors mean the methodologies via which the vulnerabilities are found. So the most prevalent are Qualys cloud agents, internal virtual scanners, or you might have heard of the hardware appliances as well, or the external scanners. So as a part of this service, we prefer that the default sensor for this service offering be the cloud agent, the Qualys cloud agent. And why so? There is a reason to it. Qualys Cloud agents, they are extremely lightweight agents, and they do provide you the real-time scanning because they scan at the frequency of 4 hours or 8 hours. We can customize this. And the agents that are installed on the machines, they send the data at a regular frequency of this 4 hours or 8 hours to the servers, where the Qualys Cloud servers actually, do the detection or where they come up with the detection logic for finding the vulnerabilities. So since this is lightweight, it offers you the continuous monitoring, and it doesn't impact the performance, absolutely does not impact the performance. And that's why we prefer Qualys Cloud agents to be the default sensor for scanning for the vulnerabilities. However, there are some cases where agents cannot be installed. Examples, examples like network devices, firewalls, or switches, right? So in that case, in order to scan those devices, what we really do is we prefer to use virtual scanner appliances in an either on-prem fashion or in on cloud as well. One good thing about the internal virtual scanners of Qualys is that there are pre-authorized scanner images that are already available in the AWS, Zoo, GCP marketplaces, so that the hassles of getting permissions, the change management, they get reduced a bit, and you can very easily have those scanner images and up an instance with the virtual scanner of Qualys in your environment or in your VPC and so on. The third sensor that we are going to use, we do suggest to our customers, is the external scanners. Why is it needed? It is needed to scan the vulnerabilities uh, from the external, that is internet point of view. Okay, so these scanners are typically hosted by Qualys in the cloud, and from there they actually assess for the vulnerabilities and then find out the vulnerabilities. Typical way in which it is done is mostly the unauthenticated scans of your external facing assets. So we are suggesting, and we do suggest to our customers that all of these, the combination of these three sensors is to be used so that you get the complete coverage of scanning across your entire IT estate. Next slide, please. So we talked about asset scoping, we talked about sensors. How do we actually set up the scans, right? The scans need to be set up perfectly so that we actually get the maximum detection in terms of vulnerabilities. So we prefer the scan frequency to be of 4 hours in case of agents, And whenever we are talking about network devices, we typically suggest the frequency of daily or weekly scans. The scan configurations that are provided by Qualys as a part of default configuration are some of the cases where if the OS gets updated, if the app gets updated, if the IP gets rotated within the series or within a range of IPs, so the scanning can still be done. We can also put a limit on the time or the duration that a scan takes on per asset so that your business is not impacted at all. On the top of that, what we provide as a value add from Critical Start is that there could be some specific requirements coming in at specific times. So, for example, uh, there could be some vulnerabilities that are trending or active currently, like Log4j, WannaCry, Heartbeat, and so on, right? So sometimes your partners, your customers may ask you, or your top management can also ask you about the exposure of these vulnerabilities within your network. So we can set up scan policies for such specific vulnerabilities. And we can also set up some scan policies for scanning particular set of ports, services for typical security updates if they have been applied or not. To check that, we can set the scan policies. Same goes with the blacklisted software ports and services as well. One more thing about scan policies is that this is also a very recurrent kind of requirement. The requirement is that time to time, some certain servers are decommissioned, right? Or let's say if the assets are there in the cloud, they get rotated or the instances get terminated. So in that case, what really happens is the host becomes dead. So there is no need for you to see that dead host in Qualys or in the core platform or looking at the vulnerability data on those assets. Next slide, please. One more very strenuous task about setting up the vulnerability program is really operationalizing the scans. So sometimes we prefer and we recommend you the authenticated scans. Sometimes we do prefer the unauthenticated scans. Sometimes on demand and sometimes scheduled scans, once again, depending on the business requirements of such. So this routine, setting up of scans as such can look mundane, but if everything is going good, right? But what if the scan fails? The scan can fail because of broken authentication, permissions are changed, and so on and so forth, right? So we, that is our managed services team, comes to your rescue to debug the failed scan job and fix it by identifying a particular problem. Next slide, please. So output of any vulnerability management solution obviously lies in the quality of reports, right? These reports then further are provided to the downstream systems for integration with various systems or to operational teams. Qualys typically provides technical reports, executive reports, or patch reports. These are the three reports which are like most commonly or typically used by Qualys customers. These are meant for different personas as well. So for someone who is working in the operations, they will be interested in technical reports, while someone who is in the who is like CISO or an executive, they will be more interested in looking into the trends of vulnerabilities, what got open, like which vulnerabilities or how many vulnerabilities got open in last month, how many got closed at last month, and so on and so forth. uh, what and where we think we add value to these reports is the curating and segregation of this report data. I think you can relate to this very, very easily because all of you know that the owners of the production environments and non-production environments are different, right? The owners of operating system patching and the app patching, they are different. So we segregate this report data according to the stakeholders and send this curated data in the form of a report to multiple stakeholders. As you would also, some of you would also know that the vulnerabilities, like as Chris mentioned earlier, when they're coming in like thousands, right? All of them cannot be closed, and there is a need to raise exception so that the vulnerability, can be accepted for some business reasons such as. And that's where we come to your rescue. We do track the exceptions manually so that they won't turn up in your subsequent vulnerability reports and you need not have a look at them again and again. Next slide. Yes. When the vulnerabilities are coming into thousands and hundreds, right? Uh, as Chris said earlier, when everything is urgent, nothing really is, right? And that's where we think we provide the value by computing a risk score and helping you prioritize the vulnerabilities from a risk perspective, from the reduction of risk perspective. And in order to do that, we take into consideration the factors like criticality of the assets or the threat that a particular vulnerability brings on, like ransomwares, exploitation, then if it is involved in botnets, or if it is like generally weaponized or if at all the vulnerability is present on a critical asset, but there is no endpoint security control as such. So we help you prioritize the vulnerabilities so that you can patch them, remediate these vulnerabilities first, and reduce the risk as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Uh, with the prioritized list of vulnerabilities, we also do provide the list of patches to the teams so that it is easier for them to patch. Next slide. Here are like one more type of report, which is like a remediation report, where Qualys provides like what exactly was detected, also the risk that the particular vulnerability brings in, the step-by-step process to fix that vulnerability. So this is given by Qualys in their standard remediation reports. Once again, we provide you the list with the prioritized list of vulnerabilities. As I said earlier, we send the patch reports to stakeholders. And important thing is that we also help you set up the process with your downstream integration ticketing systems like ServiceNow, for example, where you can track the tickets, close the tickets, and handle the vulnerability closure. Next slide, please. Yes. So for vulnerabilities, uh, from a compliance perspective as well, it's very important that you close the vulnerabilities in time. And according to many generic compliance requirements coming in via CIS, PCI, or NIST, these certain requirements are like common, and we do follow those processes and practices as a part of our service offerings, like minimum quarterly scans or scanning internal as well as external scans, or maintaining the privacy of the data, handling of the vulnerabilities within the designated SLAs, and so on and so forth. Uh, we also help you to achieve the PCI DSS 4.0 compliance because Qualys is one of the approved scanning vendors by PCI, wherein we can give you the audit report which is certified by PCI. Next slide, please. Uh, Once you are done with the onboarding and implementation as such, so there onwards, we engage with you on a monthly or quarterly basis in the form of review meetings. And in those meetings, we present to you with the actionable presentation deck where we provide you all those vulnerabilities. If you patch those first, then the risk will get reduced in a quick manner as such. We also give you the customized dashboard data, and we also track the exceptions and we present those exceptions, the vulnerabilities with respect to their aging in that particular deck. We also do suggest the appropriate SLAs according by considering your business for all of those vulnerabilities. Next slide. Okay. So here we come. So here you can see that we at Critical Start, with the help of Qualys, do support the evolution, or we do support increasing the maturity of your vulnerability management program as such. So if you are somewhere wherein you are currently getting the vulnerability scanning done just once in a year, that too only, let's say, for critical assets, or only as a part of the pen testing report, then we help you to go to the next stage wherein we provide you with the complete coverage of all the assets. All the assets are scanned for vulnerabilities, 24 by 7 operations, continuous monitoring of all the assets and the sensors, and so on. And if you're already at that stage, or with our help, you reach to that stage, the next important transition for you, which is like very important from risk perspective or reducing the risk perspective, is that we help you prioritize the vulnerabilities based on the risk that they bring upon. So that is it. And we have our next poll question coming up. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just get off camera. So our last poll question, would you like to learn more about our vulnerability management service? Now, because we have partnered with Qualys to do a managed services for vulnerability management, we need the Qualys tool there. So if you'd like to learn more, we're glad to talk to you. But some of the prerequisites are you must have Qualys deployed, or you don't have one and you'd like to add one, or you're okay and thinking about replacing your current vulnerability tool provider with Qualys. So while you answer the poll, I just want to just to say a few things. So Aditi going through in detail our service delivery tasks for managed services is very important. In fact, we have a service description that has 30 pages just on this. And that really speaks to spending with my time working at Qualys before is it doesn't matter in some cases what the tool is, but if it's not implemented correctly, installed correctly, configured correctly, operated correctly, and more importantly, being account for change management as things happen. You can't believe how many times I've seen that you have a virtual appliance scanner and someone turns off the VMware machine and then it's down, right? It doesn't mean you have less vulnerabilities. It just means you're not finding new vulnerabilities, right? So that's why for this session and this webinar, we not really talk about all the 9,000 features of the Qualys tool, but talked about why it's important to have a mature program and why the process and the operating mechanisms for a mature program is so important. And that's what we've done as part of our managed services. And then by bringing that data from Qualys into the Critical Start platform, now you have this connective view of an asset, their alerts, their vulnerabilities, how missing endpoint controls impact vulnerability risk scores, and how threat intel targeting vulnerabilities. That's why we bring it into the Critical Start platform. So this has been a very thoughtful decision for us to deploy this capability. And we believe that it's a great next step to help customers reduce risk and have a more cyber resilient organization. So thank you for attending the webinar. I think I have one last slide, which is Q&A, and we're running short of time, but there have been questions answered and asked. So thanks very much. I'll hand it back to Rebecca for any of the final housekeeping and to say goodbye.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Aditi. You'll be hearing from us tomorrow with the link to the recording. And if you answered yes to our last poll, we'll make sure to reach out to you so you can learn a little bit more about our vulnerability management services. All right, everyone. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.